A tragic news tickers run across the bottom of every major network. Breaking: Ozzy Osbourne dead at 76. The world doesn't want to believe it, but the headlines keep coming. TMZ, CNN, Rolling Stone, BBC, they all confirm it. It isn't a rumor this time. The world's most unlikely survivor, the man who danced with madness for over 5 decades, is finally gone. In the days that follow, tributes pour in from around the world. Sharon Osbourne tells the press, "He was my warrior. Until the very last breath." His children post tearful photos and unreleased family memories, each one more heartbreaking than the last. But there's one voice that's missing. One silence that's louder than any tribute. Alice Cooper, Ozzy's oldest living peer, his chaotic mirror in eyeliner and leather, says nothing. And then, 3 days after Ozzy's death, in a concert hall bathed in red light, Alice Cooper finally speaks. What he says will change everything. Ozzy Osbourne never fit the mold of a rock star. He wasn't the clean-cut genius like Lennon. He wasn't the poetic rebel like Morrison. He was the underdog from Birmingham, the factory worker's son who stumbled into music because he had nowhere else to go. Music didn't save Ozzy Osbourne. It unleashed him. In 1968, Black Sabbath was born. And with it, a sound that sounded like the end of the world. Dark, heavy, unapologetic. Critics called it noise. Fans called it church. And at the center of it all, stood Ozzy, possessed by something no one could name. His voice wasn't perfect. It was better. It was real. Haunted. Wounded. Electric. By the mid-1970s, Sabbath had become legend. But Ozzy was unraveling. Drugs. Booze. Madness. He was fired from his own band in 1979. Most thought it was the end. Instead, it was just the beginning. His solo career exploded like a bomb. With Randy Rhoads at his side, Ozzy created a second act no one thought possible. He wasn't just the frontman anymore. He was the spectacle. He bit the head off a bat. He snorted ants on tour. He fought demons, real and imagined. He became a legend in the most literal sense, a story people told when the lights went out. But legends don't age easily. And Ozzy's body began to pay the price. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2020. A fall in his home in 2019 nearly left him paralyzed. The world watched as he stumbled on stage, then returned, then stumbled again. And yet, he never stopped performing. Never stopped singing. Never stopped being Ozzy. Until July 22, 2025. Long before Marilyn Manson painted his face or Slipknot donned masks, there were 2 men dragging horror into the spotlight and setting the stage on fire. Ozzy Osbourne and Alice Cooper. They were not rivals in the usual sense. They were brothers of the bizarre. 2 sides of the same grotesque coin. Alice came first, emerging from Detroit in the late 60s with mascara, fake blood, and boa constrictors. He shocked America with Gallows on stage and songs about teenage nightmares. He made middle America squirm. And he loved every second of it. Ozzy, coming out of England's industrial rot, was more primal. Where Alice was theatrical, Ozzy was unfiltered. Alice staged horror. Ozzy lived in it. Their friendship spanned decades. They toured together. They drank together. They got sober, separately, then together. They celebrated each other's successes and mourned the losses that followed. Ozzy once said in an interview, "Alice is the only man I ever met who made me feel tame." Alice replied, "Ozzy makes me look like a schoolteacher." The public loved them as icons. But in private, they were survivors. Both had crawled out of addiction. Both had outlived their critics. Both had outlived their youth. And both knew, time was running out. It was exactly 8 days before Ozzy's death. Alice Cooper was on the road with his Darkened Truth tour, playing amphitheaters across Europe. On that night, he was in Zurich. The show had just ended. He was backstage, sipping a protein shake and reading an old comic book. At 11:47 p.m., his phone rang. It was Ozzy. Alice would later say, "It was the clearest I'd heard him in years." The call lasted nearly 2 hours. They talked about everything: the shows, the old days, the friends they'd lost. Alice joked about needing hip surgery. Ozzy laughed about his new cane. Then the tone shifted. Ozzy got quiet. "I need you to promise me something," he said. Alice paused. "Anything, brother." Ozzy's voice dropped. "If something happens to me, you have to tell the truth." "The truth about what?" Alice asked. There was a long silence on the line. Then Ozzy said, "You'll know." Before hanging up, he added one more thing: "Check your mail." It's already on the way. The next morning, Alice told his wife Cheryl, Ozzy called last night. It felt like goodbye. The death heard around the world. When the news broke on July 22nd, it was Sharon who made the announcement. Her voice cracked on national TV. My husband, my love, my warrior, is gone. The cause of death was listed as complications related to Parkinson's disease, but fans speculated. Had something else gone wrong? Was there a fall? A relapse? A heart failure that no one saw coming? The tributes came fast and heavy. Tony Iommi, sitting in his garden, simply said, "A piece of me is gone." James Hetfield called him, "the flame that lit 1,000 fires." Even Elton John appeared on BBC, visibly shaken. He was one of the few who truly lived music. But no one expected what came next. On July 25th, 3 days after Ozzy's death, Alice Cooper walked onto the stage at London's O2 Arena wearing a long black coat with red trim. A black t-shirt underneath bore a simple message, "Ozzy Forever." He stepped toward the microphone and lowered his head. The arena fell silent. When he looked up, his mascara was smudged. His voice shook as he spoke. "I've seen a lot of friends go. Lemmy, David, Jeff Beck. But this one." He paused, wiped his face with a trembling hand. This one hit different. A quiet murmur swept through the crowd. Alice took a breath. "Ozzy called me 8 days before he died," he said. "And he asked me to do something. Something hard." He looked down. Then up. "And I will. But not tonight. Tonight, we honor him." He raised one hand, fingers shaking, and pointed backstage. From the shadows walked Johnny Depp, guitar slung over his shoulder. Alice nodded. "Let's do this one last time for the prince." The band launched into Paranoid. The crowd screamed. People cried. Alice sang the chorus through clenched teeth, like a man possessed. When the song ended, the lights dimmed. Alice spoke one last time that night. "There's more to this story. And soon. I'll tell it." On the morning of July 27, 2025, just 5 days after Ozzy's passing, there were no trailers, no warnings, no credits. Just a black screen that faded to reveal Alice Cooper sitting in a dimly lit studio chair. The interview began slowly. His hair was tied back. No makeup. No snakes. No leather. He wore a plain black shirt and a cross around his neck. The interviewer asked, "Alice, why have you been silent until now?" He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Because I didn't know if I had the guts to do this," he said. "Ozzy asked me to carry something for him. A burden, really. I didn't know how to honor it. I still don't." Alice continued, "He sent me something. A week before he died. He told me on the phone, 'If I go, you talk. You speak. Don't let them rewrite the story.'" "What did he mean by that?" the interviewer asked. Alice hesitated. For a full 10 seconds, he said nothing. Then, he looked straight into the lens. "Ozzy believed someone was watching him," he said. "He believed someone wanted him dead." The interviewer blinked. Alice nodded. "He wasn't paranoid," he added. "He was certain. And now, I am too." As Alice Cooper began to unpack what he had received from Ozzy, a hush fell over the studio. "He mailed it to me himself," Alice said. "Overnight. FedEx." The package arrived in Switzerland the morning after he called. It was labeled just for Alice. "Burn after listening." Inside was a single cassette tape and a short note that read, "You always kept the monsters on stage. I couldn't play this if I go." But he shared what he heard. "I listened to it in my hotel room in Geneva," he said. "I sat on the edge of the bed, plugged an old Walkman into the wall, and pressed play." The tape began with silence. Then static. Then Ozzy's unmistakable, raspy voice. He was coughing. Then, "If you're hearing this, I'm gone. And it wasn't just Parkinson's. It wasn't just bad genes. Someone's been trying to end me for years. And they're gonna get away with it unless you say something." Alice said his entire body went cold. He paused during the interview, took a drink of water, and said something that would ignite fire across the music world. "Ozzy told me. He believed someone close to him poisoned his food in 2024. That his medications were tampered with. That he found things in his house that didn't belong there. He thought he was being manipulated into dying slowly, publicly, so it looked natural." The interviewer whispered, "Do you believe it?" Alice nodded, eyes rimmed red. "I do now." The following evening, Ozzy's voice played over a black screen. If I die and they say it's Parkinson's, fine. But remember this, I had nightmares that came true. I saw people sneaking in when I was asleep. I woke up with bruises. Sharon doesn't believe me. Says it's the meds. But I know. The public reaction was immediate and explosive. Was this the incoherent rambling of a man in decline? Or a chilling last confession? Alice Cooper refused to release the full tape, claiming it would put certain people at risk. But he did say one thing that sent conspiracy forums into overdrive. Ozzy names names. On the tape. One of them is still in the business. That was all he said. No further context. No hints. But it was enough. Within 48 hours, the internet lit up with theories. Was Ozzy's tape a cry for help? Or a breadcrumb trail pointing to something darker? Some fans pointed to lawsuits over his royalties. Others referenced his long-standing battle with record labels, shady managers, and even pharmaceutical companies. Back in the early 2000s, there were rumors of mishandled finances, missing millions, and backstage betrayals. Alice added fuel to the fire. He felt used, he told Rolling Stone the next day. He told me in 2021 that someone he trusted had been slowly bleeding him dry. I didn't ask who. He didn't say. But now I wonder. The theories multiplied. An ex-manager. A rival musician. Even a medical professional. Journalists dug up court records. Former bodyguards came forward anonymously. The public wasn't satisfied. They wanted answers. The world had not yet absorbed the full weight of Ozzy Osbourne's death when Alice Cooper sat before the cameras. He wasn't dressed in his usual theatrical darkness. He wore a simple black suit and a cross around his neck. His eyes looked distant, like he was remembering something from 1,000 years ago. The setting was modest, just a single chair in a dark room, a spotlight hitting him from the left. The interview was broadcast live, and millions tuned in expecting memories, tears, maybe a story or two about biting the heads off things or their wild touring days. But what they got instead changed everything. Alice took a deep breath. There's something I've never told anyone, he said. Not my wife. Not my band. Not even Sharon. But Ozzy and I, we made a promise to each other in 1999. Just two old wolves, staring down the end. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. We made a pact. He said to me, whoever dies first, the other has to tell the truth. The real truth. Not the story people know, the story people need to know. And now he's gone. And I've got to keep my end. The camera panned in closer, and you could almost feel the air tighten. We weren't just performers. We weren't just shock rockers. We were hiding something. Alice didn't elaborate further in that first sit-down. The tension was intentional. But the words echoed like thunder across social media. What truth was he talking about? What were they hiding? Within minutes, hashtags like hashtag the Ozzy Oath and hashtag Alice Knows began trending globally. People from every corner of the world started speculating. Was it about music? Drugs? Satanism? Government secrets? Or something darker? One thing was now certain, Ozzy's story wasn't over. In death, it had just taken a terrifying turn. July 5, 2025. The National Bowl in Milton Keynes, England. 65,000 screaming fans. The final concert of Ozzy Osbourne. Nobody knew it then, but that night would become a sacred bookmark in the history of rock. Cameras caught him waving, bowing, saying, "I love you all." He looked frail but strong, tired but proud. Most assumed it was just his usual drama. Few realized he would die just over 2 weeks later. But there was one man in the audience who saw the truth that night. He wasn't sitting in the VIP booth. He wasn't backstage. He was just a shadow in the crowd, wearing a baseball cap and dark sunglasses. Alice Cooper had flown in secretly. He didn't tell Ozzy he was coming. He hadn't seen him face to face in nearly a year. Their last phone call had ended abruptly, with Ozzy mumbling something cryptic, "I don't think they'll let me finish." "They?" Alice had asked. But Ozzy had already hung up. Watching from the sea of fans, Alice felt something was off from the start. Ozzy's timing was slightly off during Crazy Train. He kept glancing to the side of the stage. At one point, during No More Tears, he stopped mid-verse and appeared to whisper to himself. But it was backstage where the real strangeness happened. Alice was allowed in briefly, only after pulling strings and name-dropping every promoter he'd ever worked with. When he finally made it behind the curtain, Ozzy was sitting alone. His band had gone silent. Sharon was nowhere to be seen. Ozzy looked up and smiled, but it wasn't his usual grin.
"You came," he whispered. "I had to," Alice replied.
"It's the last ride."
Ozzy's voice dropped.
"I think they poisoned me."
Alice blinked. "What?"
But Ozzy only shook his head.
"I've said too much."
"You'll know when the time comes." That would be the last time Alice ever saw him alive. The interview hadn't been out for even 12 hours before it set the world on fire. Alice Cooper's revelation, his candid soul-bearing account of Ozzy Osbourne's final conversations, that cryptic warning Ozzy gave him about the truth being too dangerous, landed with the force of a thunderclap. Rock magazines, mainstream news outlets, and social media platforms exploded with speculation. Clips of the interview were shared and reshared, dissected, slowed down, lip-read, and translated into dozens of languages. Everywhere you looked, people were talking about it. Some fans were heartbroken. Others were furious. And a growing number were deeply suspicious. Across Reddit forums, Discord servers, and even in mainstream podcasts, questions began pouring in. What exactly did Ozzy mean by the truth? Why did he tell Alice not to speak? Was he hiding something, or protecting someone? Many recalled Ozzy's sudden withdrawal from the press in the final months of his life. The cancelled appearances.
The cryptic posts.
The odd body language in his last public photos.
To many fans, it didn't add up.
Conspiracy theories sprang to life like wildfire. Some believed Ozzy had uncovered something dark about the music industry, something he didn't want to take to the grave. Others thought he had been pressured into silence. A few even believed he had been silenced, though Alice never implied anything of the sort. It didn't take long before hashtags like #OzzyKnew and #LetThePrinceSpeak began trending globally. Theories ranged from absurd to chillingly plausible. TikTok creators made videos analyzing the tone of Ozzy's voice in interviews from the past decade. YouTubers posted hour-long breakdowns of his final lyrics. Twitter users began compiling timelines, searching for irregularities in his final weeks. Amid all this, Alice Cooper remained mostly silent. He gave no further interviews. No clarifications. His team issued a short statement saying, "Mr. Cooper stands by what he said. It was Ozzy's wish." That silence only added to the mystery. And for millions of grieving fans, it became clear, the story wasn't finished. As the final echoes of Alice Cooper's words settled over the crowd, a heavy silence took hold, one filled with sorrow, reverence, and unspoken questions. The world had lost a legend, but the story was far from over. Some truths, once whispered in darkness, now demanded to be heard. And in the shadows cast by Ozzy's passing, a revelation waited, one that promised to shake the very foundations of rock history. This was only the beginning. Thank you for joining us in this emotional journey through the final days of Ozzy Osbourne and Alice Cooper's haunting revelations. This video was created to honor not only a rock icon but to keep the conversation alive, because as we've seen, the story may be just beginning. Please like this video to help share Ozzy's legacy with the world. Subscribe to the channel for more true stories, music legends, and exclusive interviews you won't find anywhere else. And hit the notification bell so you're the first to know when we reveal the next video in this ongoing mystery. Long live the legend!